Okay, so welcome to Supervision. My name is Robert Farrow. I am a licensed professional counselor supervisor here in the state of Texas, and this is one of many so far that I've created for my supervisees. In Texas, they're referred to as licensed professional counselor associates, and if you are one of them, welcome. You'll be seeing me on a regular basis, at least once a week. If you are not one of my associates, then welcome anyway. I mean, this is all really about trying to promote and improve our profession, our field, and to make each other better. So this one is looking at the TAC, and we're going to answer what that is in a moment. This recording is probably going to be one of the longest I will do, mainly because there's so much involved. There is a lot to the TAC, and I'm going to cover it in an abridged format. I'm not going to be good at doing all of it. It's just too much. I will say this: if you're one of my supervisees, you will likely, if you haven't been already, you will be instructed to go on your own and read all of it. Okay, there's a reason for it. So let's go ahead and get started. Put your seatbelt on. This is going to take a little bit. Get you a cup of Joe or whatever you like to drink, and we'll get this started. Okay, so what is the Texas Administrative Code? And that's what TAC stands for, Texas Administrative Code. First of all, it is the law. This is the law that we go with. This is what rules and governs our profession as counselors. It is specific to the state of Texas. You cannot take this to any other state and expect it to fly with their judicial system. It probably just won't work. Also, pointing out, it does govern all forms of business and industry in Texas. We're going to see that here momentarily in a little more detail. Under the TAC, there are at present time the titles, Title 1 through Title 43. Notice the title numbers are not sequential, they do jump around. We are under Title 22, examining boards. This will make more sense as we go through it. Part 30, Texas State Board of Examiners of Professional Counselors. Now, yes, as you have probably already figured out, that has merged with the Texas Board of Social Work Examiners, as well as the Licensed Marriage Family Therapist Board. It is all merged into one behavioral board, but we're still under this exact same code. There's no real change to that, okay? The board itself has now been joined in, so it was, I think, more of an administrative financial thing than anything else. It just streamlined the whole process. That way we all go through the same organization. All right, so for us, we are Title 22, Part 30, Chapter 681 for professional counselors. There's 4 subchapters under our chapter. I will only be covering subchapters A and B in this video, and it's pretty lengthy. Application and licensing. Subchapter C is one that if you are already licensed as an associate, you have been through this to a certain extent. So you want to read through that again. You'll cover it more in years to come if and when you choose to become a supervisor. Subchapter D, that's the not so much fun part of what they have the right to do to us legally. Not just can they remove your license, but there's some other penalties that can go with it depending on what you do or do wrong, more accurately stated. Okay, so looking at chapter B, rules of practice. This is an important section. This is what tells us what we can and cannot do as counselors. Subchapter, we're looking at the different sections now, point 31, point 41, point 42. I will be covering only those 3 for this video, looking at point 43 on testing, point 44 drug and alcohol use, point 45 confidentiality and required reporting, I'm going to talk about that one briefly, but not in a whole lot of detail. The whole idea here is that you need to go in and read these for yourself. They're not real pretty to look at, and it doesn't take long, but you do need to look at. Okay, so subchapter B, rules of practice. Like I said, I'm going to be covering .31, counseling methods and practices. Those are the things that we are allowed to use and to do. Also, we're going to be looking at general ethical requirements. This is going to pair up almost perfectly to the code we looked at from the ACA in the previous videos. You'd be surprised how evenly matched it really is. And then lastly, we're going to be looking at sexual misconduct. Like I've said during the videos on ethics, guys, this one is so serious. Don't do it. Okay, Rule 681.31, counseling methods and practice. I've got to grade out here the introduction, the use of specific methods, techniques, or modalities within the practice of professional counseling is limited to professional counselors appropriately trained and competent in the use of such methods, techniques, or modalities. They're going to go into a list of them here in a moment. Authorized counseling methods, techniques, and modalities may include, but are not restricted to, the following. Here we go. Individual counseling which uses, here's where it's all at. Interpersonal, cognitive, behavioral, psychodynamic, affective methods and strategies. Those are our areas. Those are our theories, guys. For the LPC associates that are under me directly, I have already started talking to you about developing your theory, taking it and making it yours, how you can use it to best serve your clients. Now, when we have that theory, what do we then do with it? Notice the following section that says, okay, the effective methods and strategies to achieve mental, emotional, physical, social, moral, educational, career, and spiritual development and adjustment through the lifespan. That is a very tight sentence, and it tells us a whole lot of information. So we're looking at helping people with mental illness, emotional instabilities and emotional regulation problems, physical problems. That would fall under the realm of the rehabilitation counseling. When someone's had a major injury, loss of an arm, loss of fingers, and they need to go through rehab, not just for physical therapy and occupational, but there's going to be some emotional as well, adjusting. Social concepts and issues that we run into. Moral, hey, that's kind of an interesting aspect. Moral issues. A lot of folks are going to be dealing with morality and ethical dilemmas in their personal lives. Educational counseling and educational choices. Career counseling, they go hand in hand. I have no way of being able to actually tell you how many clients that I see on a regular basis that eventually come down to an education and a career choice in life that they have to discuss. Also, I want to point out the next one here says spiritual development and adjustment. That goes right along with the moral ethical development. A lot of folks want to have the whole idea of separation of church and state taken all the way into the counseling session. Well, the state of Texas gives you, the LPC associate, the legal right to help people discuss spiritual issues. Okay? Now, you don't have to have a master's or above in theology or any kind of like that. It's not about what you know, it's about what they know and what they believe in. Helping them to do that is what this is all about. So the rest of these fall under group counseling, and it's almost going to be identical to what we've looked at already. Interpersonal, cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, affective methods and strategies, etc., etc. It's going to be saying the same thing. We use it for individuals. We can also use it with groups. Marriage and family counseling, couples counseling, same approach. Interpersonal, cognitive, behavioral, psychodynamic, affective methods, etc., etc. Also with family. Okay, now with family, that one there may be a little different because in this category, you're also going to be looking at some other systems theories that would apply. So they give us a little more leeway on that one. Addiction counseling. Okay, so for those of you that have your LCDC in hand or are planning on getting it, this one falls into our category as well. As an LPC and an LPC associate, you have the right and authority to work with addictions, as well as going into rehabilitation. Same thing here, guys. Interpersonal, cognitive behavioral, psychodynamic, etc., and so on. All right, going into number 7, educational counseling. This one's a little bit different. That one is mostly going to be geared for school counselors and the like. Even if they're at the community college or the university level, educational counseling has with it slightly altered areas of specialty. I am not a school counselor, have never been one, and for that, if you're in that area, you'd want to get some specialized supervision to help you through that. Career development counseling, I do have enough experience in that to help those that want to develop that skill set. Number 9, sexual issues. It is amazing how often you will run into clients who are going to have sexual issues, sexual hang-ups, because it follows along with moral and ethical as well as value, personal identity, personal concepts and constructs of who we are as people. It's a major component to counseling. Making number 10, referral counseling. When you get in over your head, you have to be real honest with folks and say, look, I'm going to need to make a referral for you to work with someone on that, simply because it is outside my scope. That's how I interpret this one. For example, I personally do not work with anyone that is dealing with an eating disorder that requires some very specialized experience. I don't have it, and so I use that one as my primary referral. Number 11, psychotherapy, which uses interpersonal, cognitive, all the others as we've already mentioned. Basically, what that one is trying to say is psychotherapy and counseling are one and the same. You can use the terminology however you want. You can say therapy, therapist, psychotherapy, counseling. They're the same. Number 12 is, however, different. Play therapy. Play therapy requires very specialized training and experience. I do want to point out, you can do play in therapy. There's a difference. Play therapy requires a very specialized format that requires people to experience their issues non-verbally through play. Words may be there, but it's not just a talk therapy format. Play therapy is very unique. However, as you can see behind me, I use sand tray, and I got lots of figurines back here, okay? It is a form of play. It is play in therapy. Sand tray is kind of unique in that regard. As a modality, it is one that's highly effective based upon symbolic interaction between their memories, their thoughts, their emotions, and how they're going to display it that day. Okay, I find it to be very useful. I am not a play therapist, nor will I ever profess to be one, but I will use on occasion different play therapy aspects because they are very effective and I've had training in it. All right, hypnotherapy, number 13. That one requires specialized training. It does have its place and it is effective. Expressive modalities, that one's kind of unique with regards to going through interpersonal and emotional work. This one's, you'll notice in the second sentence there, it says included but not limited to music, art, dance, and other movement-oriented type aspects employing animals for providing treatment. That one, I would say, requires a little extra training over and above what you've got, especially if you want to go into dance or art therapy orientations. For that one, I'm not qualified to educate on that, but they are effective. I've seen some videos and training on it, and it's quite interesting. Number 15 on biofeedback. Guys, this one here is really high tech. It is extremely effective, but at the same time, it's also extremely expensive. And so it deserves its own category because it requires extra training. Number 16, assessing and appraising. This one here follows up with section 681.43 on testing, which I will not be covering today in depth. But suffice it to say, notice in the green highlight, we are looking for strengths and weaknesses, mental status, emotional stability, intellectual ability, interest, aptitudes, achievement, level, and other characteristics for diagnosing mental health disorder. There's a specific aspect to this, mental health disorder. Anything you bring into your assessment has to come straight out of the DSM. We are currently in DSM-5, and if you're going to be documenting something specific, it had better be from that criteria book. Notice in the yellow highlight, does not pertain to diagnosis of a physical condition or physical disorder. You are not properly trained to make those diagnostic abilities. Not an MD. LPCs, we are only allowed to work in one area of making a diagnosis or an assessment evaluation, and that is in mental health only. You can't do anything physical diagnosis. Okay, consulting, yeah, you can do that. Crisis counseling, kind of unique. There's been a big push through the country to increase crisis services. I myself had spent 6 years working in crisis specific, 7 total in the generalized crisis industry of mental illness and mental health in the Harris County area. Those interventions and modalities are a little different, and if you're under me as one of my associates, we'll be discussing those at a later date and helping you develop those skills as well. Okay, so we've just covered all of the legal aspects of what you can and cannot do legally. Okay, granted, there's more to it than what I've covered. I went through it really fast. So far, we are at clock timer 17 minutes and 50 seconds. And we're just now touching on the general ethical of Rule 0.41. So moving on. Okay, highlights here is what I'm going to be looking at mostly. A licensee must not make any false, misleading, deceptive, fraudulent, or exaggerated claim or statement about the licensee's services, specifically related to effectiveness of service. Guys, what this one is really saying is if you make a statement that you're going to heal someone, you better back it up. You better have enough science and research behind it to be able to say that not only do you know you can do it, but here's all the research that says how it works. Basically, guys, you can't say that, okay? You cannot go in and tell people that within 6 sessions or 12 sessions or however many sessions you want that you can make them however they want to be, okay? You can help them achieve goals, but we cannot promise very much. There's too many factors and variables involved, and on top of that, if you are deliberately misleading in order to maintain clients or do something of that sort, that is highly unethical, and therefore it is against the law. Okay, also, with regards to your education, your qualifications, background training, etc., you got to be very honest and open with that. No deception, no misleading it. For that reason, it is also very important, notice down in section D, where it says a licensee must make reasonable effort to discourage others whom the licensee does not control from making misinterpretations or misrepresentations, exaggerated or false claims. This is an important one. For example, a lot of folks don't know the difference between a counselor, a social worker, a psychologist, a psychiatrist. They just don't know the difference. It is our job to educate them about those differences. For example, as a counselor, I can do family therapy. I'm not an LMFT. I'm not a licensed marriage and family therapist. I'm an LPC. But I can still do family and couples work. I'm an LPC, not a psychologist. Okay? The licensing is different. The training is different. Psychologists primarily focus, at least from my understanding, their primary focus is in testing and things of that sort. Yes, they can do the same thing we can do, but they can do a little bit more. Okay? Also, there again, I'm not a medical doctor, neither are you. Okay? If you're an LPC associate, you went through school for a 60-hour KCREP approved program in the state of Texas or one of the other states to get your licensing. At no point in time did you go to medical school. If you did, then you got the wrong license. Make sure you represent yourself appropriately. If you are a doctor and it is in a counseling field, then you can be called doctor. If you're not, then you shouldn't be. It's very confusing to people. It can be misleading. This law is where you will get hung up. All right. Next one, regardless of setting, a licensee must provide counseling only in the context of a professional relationship. We're now referring to dual relationships and how that kind of thing works. Guys, real important. This is just like the sexual misconduct, which is a form of dual relationship. This is where most LPCs are going to get in trouble. Okay? So, because of that, prior to providing services, a licensee must obtain from an individual signed informed consent with written receipt of information, or in the case of involuntary treatment, a copy of the appropriate court order, including the following. Now, because I have a background in crisis intervention as well as other forms of counseling, I can tell you whatever goes on the emergency detention order, they will get a copy of it. You do not want to write down something that would be embarrassing. Okay, so things they do need to be aware of. Fees and costs, payment, what's going to cost them to do counseling, the purpose, goals, and techniques you plan on using, any restrictions placed on the licensee by the council. For example, if you're an LPC associate, not a full LPC, or if you're an LPC and you're presenting yourself as an LPC supervisor, can't do that one either. The limitation of confidentiality. At what point in time does that confidentiality end, and how far can it go? There's several other ones here. Supervision of the licensee by another licensed healthcare professional, including the name, address, contact information, and qualifications of the supervisor. Guys, you need to have that, okay? For those that are my associates, ask me for it, and I can get you my resume, I can get you copies of my license, whatever you need. Okay, going all the way down there to the bottom, in accordance with 503.401 Section A, Part 4 of the Act, a licensee must not intentionally or knowingly offer to pay or agree to accept any remuneration, that's money, directly or indirectly, overtly or covertly, in cash or in kind, to or from any person, firm, association, or person's partnership, corporation, or entity. Guys, that means everybody. For securing or soliciting clients or patronage. Okay, so let me narrow that one down. What this one is saying is when you get referrals, you cannot pay for them. They have to be sent to you without being paid. If you're paying for a referral, then there's preferential treatment being involved, and that's not appropriate, it's not ethical, and it's not right. Okay, so we have to be aware that there is a law on this. Here it is. Okay, so for example, earlier this year, this is 2022, we're in January, and just earlier this year I was approached by an organization out of another country wanting me to pay them so they can send referrals to me. And I'm like, no, we can't do that. It's not legal. All right. Looking also at this aspect, you cannot engage in activities for personal gain at the expense of a client. Okay, that's the key to it. Granted, you can do counseling and charge for it. That's for personal gain, but not at the expense of your client. That's the dilemma to it. What that would mean is if you knowingly take advantage of your client, you're exploiting them. Let's say you find out they got a trust fund, and because of that, you're going to charge them more than you would someone else. That's exploitation. That's taking advantage of them at the expense of the client. You must maintain professional boundaries at all times. You want to read a little more into that one. Professional boundaries is going back to the dual relationships. We are not friends. We cannot become, buddies. That's just the way it is. Looking down there at number 5 in the highlighted green section, must not provide counseling services to previous or current family members, personal friends, educational associates, or business associates. We can't do it. Now, professional boundaries applies to that as well. We have to know where our role is and where that boundary marker's at. Also, you cannot have a non-professional counseling relationship with a client's family member, the client, or anyone else in that category. Go back to the ethical standards, and they match perfectly. Okay, licensee must not knowingly offer or provide counseling to an individual concurrently receiving counseling from someone else. Guys, you can coordinate, you can tag team, but you have to work it out. They have to sign a release of information so you can contact that other therapist. For example, I've got situations where I have couples and they are split. I have one member of the couple and another counselor has the other member of the couple, and on occasion we will tag team and do family sessions and that sort. It is not easy, and you do have to coordinate it very well. Okay, here's the last one here. Licensee may take reasonable action to inform medical or law enforcement personnel if the licensee determines there is a probability of imminent physical injury by the client to the client or others, or there is a probability of imminent mental or emotional injury to the client. Here's where we're going to get into a little dilemma, morally and ethically speaking. Texas is kind of unique, as all of you have gone through school and have already discussed this. Texas does not follow the Tarasoff ruling. As of this article here, I know it's kind of small, but that was published November 20th of 2018, and was discussing the duty to warn and protect not valid in the state of Texas. Now, here's where this one comes into play. We are not required by law to inform potential victims. On the flip side of that coin, you still have an ethical dilemma when you don't inform. So you have to be real cautious on how you want to work this one out. So for example, I tell all of my, well, it's not really an example, but I tell all of my clients when they come in for counseling, for services, it is a part of my intake paperwork. Confidentiality has its limitations, 2 of which being, if you tell me you're going to hurt yourself, I have to make a phone call. If you tell me you're going to hurt someone else, I will make a phone call. And they know up front that's what's going to happen. Now, it is not my place to contact the potential victim. That would be highly inappropriate because then I would be violating health information. But I do believe it is appropriate to contact law enforcement to let them know that a welfare check would be appropriate, that my client has made statements about hurting themselves and or other individuals. At that point in time, at least in this region of Texas, a sheriff's officer or a police officer would show up and talk to them. At that point in time, it is out of your hands. There's nothing more that we can do besides showing up, which I would not suggest doing. But we are not legally bound to make a phone call in the state of Texas in cases of threat to other people. Now, this one here is a little bit in violation of what it's stating. Okay, licensee may take responsible action to inform. It does not say must take. Okay, we have the right to make the phone call, but it says, you know, we're not held responsible if we don't. So here again, we'll talk more in detail of this and discuss various scenarios in face-to-face sessions, but this is something that you guys need to be able to think about and clearly articulate why you did what you did. Okay, last part of this one here is licensee must take responsible precautions to protect the client from physical or emotional harm resulting from interactions within a group or individual counseling. Now, this one's important if you are working at one of the local mental facilities and doing group therapy. Guys, it is very possible, and it does happen, where one client will make a statement that is a little bit inappropriate to another client and then get attacked. You are responsible to protect your clients. So, and here's where it says it. Okay. Looking at the next section there on letter Q, for each client, a licensee must keep accurate records, informed consent, written receipt of information, cases of involuntary treatment, copy of appropriate court ordering. In Harris County, that would be probate, as well as some other forms that have to be filled out. There is also the intake assessment. You have to keep records of that. Dates of counseling treatment interventions, when you did things. Principal treatment methods, concept behind what you're doing, progress notes, the treatment plan, and billing information. Now, the beautiful thing is nowadays we have electronic medical records, and they do a beautiful job of keeping all of that stuff for you, and it doesn't cost that much on a monthly basis. All right, some of the other ones that we want to look at, those records have to be maintained for 7 years. So if you decide to go into private practice, just remember, you got to keep that stuff for 7 years. It's a whole lot easier to let a company do it for you electronically. If you're going to be going through a third-party billing, then a licensee must bill clients or third parties for only those services actually rendered. If you are billing for something that you did not do, that has a special term called fraud. And I have personally seen the FBI show up at a facility and had been doing that. Okay? It's quite interesting to watch them go in and clear the building out of all electronic, all medical records. They get real testy about that because a lot of money is involved. All right. As a part of that, you cannot overbill a client. It's just not right. I mean, and it's illegal. Okay. Concerning minor clients, custody agreements, divorce decrees, you have to keep those records as well. So if you've got a couple that is divorced or separated, not so much separated, but they are divorced, then you have to have the divorce decree showing who has possessory, who has custody, it's all labeled out. We'll talk more about that in our regular sessions. Upon termination of a relationship, if professional counseling is still necessary, it is your responsibility to facilitate the transfer to an appropriate care level. For example, I had one a couple years back where he needed to be sent to a inpatient setting. He was actively getting triggered, and he was decompensating very quickly right in front of me during the session. So I had to take him to his mom and say, he's got to go to the hospital. I cannot help him at this point in time. At that point, then follow up with the facility that they're going to and let them know that you are sending someone in with mom or dad in tow. Also, if you're going to be firing a client, you have to give them referrals of where they can continue working. You can't just dump a client, and we talked about that in the videos on ethical standing. Here's the license that goes, or the, not license, but the law that goes with that one. Alrighty. Also, look at the bottom there. If you're in a session and you yourself are impaired, in other words, you went out and had something you shouldn't have had before a session, you can get in a world of trouble. Don't do it. Okay, going into our last as we begin to wrap up. We're already at 36 minutes and some seconds, but we're going to wrap this up fairly quickly. Rule 681.42 on sexual misconduct. Okay, sexual relations. No. 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 Just no. No, you don't. And think about it a second time, a third time, a fourth time, the answer is still going to be no. So, for the purpose of this section, the following terms have been defined. And this is where it gets really kind of interesting. They actually break down some definitions for clarity, because what they found was that people like to play with the English language and make it sound like it's not that big of a deal. Mental health provider, in quotation marks, means a licensee or other licensed mental health professional, including a licensed social worker, chemical dependency counselor, licensed marriage and family therapist, a physician, a psychologist, member of the clergy. Mental health provider also includes employees of these individuals or employees of a treatment facility. We would fall under that category as LPCs. You are a licensed mental health professional. So, sexual contact, what does that mean by definition? It would be deviant sexual intercourse as defined by, notice where this is coming from, Texas Penal Code. Guys, this gets real serious real fast. Sexual contact as defined by Texas Penal Code. Sexual intercourse as defined by, there it is again, Texas Penal Code. Requesting or offering by a licensee to conduct any of those things. Guys, this is, read through it yourself. This one's real serious. Sexual exploitation means a pattern, a practice, a scheme of conduct, including sexual contact that can reasonably be construed as being for the purposes of sexual arousal, gratification, or sexual abuse of any person. The term does not include obtaining information about a client's sexual history within standard acceptable practices while treating a sexual or relationship dysfunction. I think this is where we need to separate some key elements. It is okay during your intake assessment to ask about sexual history, especially if they bring it up that they have problems with it. You can ask about pornography use. You can ask if they identify as having criteria for bipolar disorder, if they've had manic episodes, if they've had sexual partners, multiple, if they've had high-risk sexual activity. You can go into those details, okay? It is a part of the field. It's a part of what we do. But there are limitations, and I think that's the real important aspect. You have to know where that line is. If you find yourself getting excited because of the topic, because of what you're having to ask, then you need to ask yourself the motivation behind it. Are you doing it for the client's benefit or for your own gratification? That is where this one's talking about, okay? Number 4, therapeutic deception means a representation by a licensee that sexual contact with or sexual exploitation by the licensee is consistent with or a part of a client's or former client's counseling. At no point in time is sexual contact a therapy. It's just not. So any kind of mental word judo you might be wanting to play, it won't work. Licensee must not engage in sexual contact with or sexual exploitation of a person who is, number 1, a client, if they are a client. And it doesn't matter if they paid or not. We are encouraged to see people for free, pro bono, so they don't have to pay sometimes. That still means they can be a client. An LPC associate supervised by the licensee. So if you're with another supervisor and they are making advances, hey, that's against the law. Students, same thing. Notice through the rest of these here, different categories of what can happen. Here again, therapeutic deception, not acceptable under any circumstance. All right, this one here is getting kind of a little more technical and detailed. Want to look at just the highlights right now. Making sexually demeaning comments such as an individual's sexual orientation, not cool, okay? If you're dealing with a client who is struggling with their identity and you make a derogatory statement in front of them, that's just really not cool. And it is, as stated here, illegal, okay? Making comments about potential sexual performance, except when the comment is pertinent to the issue of sexual function or dysfunction in counseling. Here's where you have to be able to separate what's happening. You can have a sexual conversation with a client. I've done it several times with my clients where they were struggling over sexual issues, performance issues, ability issues, having sexual addiction issues. Having the conversation is okay as long as it pertains to benefiting the client. That's the key element. If you're doing counseling session with someone and that is not their area of difficulty, then don't go there. Number 11, exposing. Don't expose yourself, okay? It's just that simple. And don't encourage them to expose themselves. The last one, it's really sad that that had to be spelled out clearly that you don't do that, okay? Guys, you don't, okay? Like I've said in the video for ethics, I forgot which one it was in now, subchapters A, B, or C, where I discuss the sexual contact and dual relationships. The state of Texas has an annual loss of close to 600 counselors per year. And that doesn't mean just LPCs. That could be clinical social workers, master social workers, LMFTs, psychologists. It's kind of lumping the mental health industry all in together, but close to 600 each year lose their license over this kind of stuff. It's completely avoidable. All right, you are also required to report sexual misconduct. Here's a list of the scenarios and what's going on. Read through it on your own. Definitely become aware of it. Find out who you want to go to. In cases such as this, I would suggest getting some consultation. If you know of something going on, share it, talk to another counselor, talk to someone else, get advice on who to go to. Okay, so we have pushed almost, well, it's going to be 45 minutes. Like I said, this is a long one, but this needed to be covered. It is your responsibility to read the rest of the Texas Administrative Code. Until next time, take care, keep doing what you're doing, and follow the rules, regulations, and ethical standings. Bye.